one of the major things is questions that you hear from the right-wing kind of Rush Limbaugh sort of types is that weather and climate, and they confuse the two things. We're talking about climate change, and climate in Texas, for example, is hot and dry, but it does rain here sometimes. That's weather. But we're not talking about weather change. We're talking about climate change. That's the key. Why don't we have more talking heads talk about that and help us poor little environmental advocates, try and spread the word?
It's a really good question. I think we in the environmental community haven't done as good a job as we need to in terms of making this real for citizens at home so they understand what it means, what is the threat. Governor Schwarzenegger in California pioneered a major piece of legislation on climate, the best that any state has passed. But first thing he did was he got together scientists from 20 universities, and they cataloged exactly what was going to happen in California. The fact that San Francisco was going to have 60 days every summer over 90 degrees, that salt water would intrude all the way up in the Sacramento Delta and into the Central Valley that our earlier caller called about in terms of the agriculture sector, that there'd be a lot less snowpack, and so a lot less water supply in California, of course, depends on that snowpack and storms for the water supply. I think we haven't done as good a job of explaining what this is all about and what it means to the average person at home and what he or she can do about it. I think it's a big task. Al Gore has been new effort to try to do that, but I think we need more of that, and I think this administration will do it. We basically lost 8 years because the beginning of the Bush administration was a big effort underway. 10 different regions of the country, they're going to look at what the threat was. What did we need to adapt to? All that work was cut off. It was only done in Seattle and in Arizona. Those two places, Phoenix and Seattle, finished the work they were doing. The other 8 areas were stopped cold in their tracks. That's going to start again. The science advisor in the White House is going to push it, and we're going to really be able to say, what does it mean for you? Because without that, why should I spend a lot more money? I mean, it makes sense. So it's coming, and I think you're right on target.
And one more call here from Bangor. Is this Bangor, Maine?
Michigan.
Michigan. I should have stuck with my
I've been to Bangor, Maine.
the production assistant's guidance. Is Bangor, Michigan. I'm sorry, James. Go ahead on our Democrats line.
Yes. I have a question about your caller talking about the concrete caskets holding spent nuclear fuel on the shore of Lake Michigan.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, and this was supposed to be a temporary deal. Now they're saying this stuff could be sitting on the lake shore for the next 50 years. What do you have to say about getting rid of the nuclear waste?
It's a good question. It goes to my answer to the earlier questioners. I think we do need to store it on the shore in safe conditions until we have figured out this underground storage, and we're confident that once we put it there, it's going to stay there and it's not going to leak, as the lady described happening at the WIPP facility in New Mexico. So I think, unfortunately, we have to live with it. I don't think there's a lot of danger there. I think it's carefully handled. It's inert. It's locked up. So I'm not too disturbed. I'm much more worried if I put it in something like the WIPP facility when I don't know what's going to happen to the groundwater and that sort of thing. So I think we will solve this, and especially if we're going to move heavily in this direction, we'll see more investment, more engineers. Basically, nuclear industry has died out over the last 20 years. We haven't built a plant since 1976, so students aren't learning nuclear engineering anymore, and they're not spending the time on the kind of questions you're asking. So we need to get it right, and I think we may have to wait a little while, but it's worth waiting.
Before we wrap up here, just once again remind us of where this process is on this treaty, this Copenhagen World Climate Treaty. What's next?
The next step, Bill, in terms of the treaty here in Copenhagen is basically we have negotiations beginning in June again, where we have to write some legal text. It's required, it has to be done in June, and then that text has to be finalized in December in Copenhagen. I think what we'll get is we will get a definition of targets, what countries like Japan and the U.S. and Canada will need to do in the next round through 2020, and we'll get an architecture that says developing countries will take actions that are monitorable, reportable, and verifiable in return for some financing. With that basic plan design, China will say, we're going to take our energy efficiency program and go further. We're going to take our renewables program, we're going to go further. And to do that, in return for that, we're looking for help with carbon capture and storage technology. We're looking for assistance on those new technologies. So when you hear this idea there's lots of money, it's not buckets of money. This is basically about very targeted efforts on key technologies that'll help us solve this problem. And unlike in the past, where we would have developed the technology here or in Europe and 20 years later do it in India or China, we have to do it now in India and China. They're building a coal plant a week. We've got to build clean coal plants. So we've got to build that technology and move it quickly. So in terms of the treaty, action in Copenhagen, probably a year or two afterward, we nail down all the details. Then we come back and maybe we have to have it ratified in the U.S. and other countries. And this round runs from 2012 to 2020, and hopefully we get enough reductions in that time to keep us on a path to hold the temperature increase to no more than 2 degrees centigrade.
Got one more quick call here for you from Portland, Oregon. Good morning. This is Alex on the line, Republican caller. Hi, Alex.
Hi, I was just wondering what your guest stance was on renewable energy sources like cannabis, and because you can use it for anything from wood to cotton to petroleum.
What was the material there, Alex?
Cannabis.
He was talking about
marijuana.
Talking about marijuana. I think we'll wrap it up on that. Ned Helme with the Clean Air Policy Center, founder and president. Thanks for being our guest this morning.
My pleasure. Thank you, Bill. Really
and we are back in just a moment. We'll talk with Alec Russell, who gives us a preview of the South African elections. His new book is called Bring Me My Machine Gun. We'll talk about the book and this Wednesday's elections in South Africa in just a moment. First, though, a news update from C-SPAN Radio.